Hi again, YouTubers. Today I'm going to be doing a response video for Mr. MackQuigley, number 48, Squashing Natural Selection, Just Those Stories. Okay, so this video is unfortunately fairly typical actually of people who don't really understand natural selection, and I hope to enlighten you, Mr. Quigley, and by explaining how it works in the simplest terms. Okay, you start with things like survival of the fittest, going on about survival of the fittest. Well, I think you misinterpret the word survival of the fittest. Darwin wasn't very keen on it either. He preferred natural selection. The problem with the term survival of the fittest is that it suggests that you need to be the fastest runner, the strongest, perhaps the best flyer, etc., which is not actually the case. It's the type of mutations that we talk about are ones that are only beneficial in the environment in which you find yourself, or the changing environment. Now, I hope to make this simpler in a moment. You quote a passage from Darwin's Origin of Species, and you say, several writers have misapprehended or objected to the term natural selection. Some have even imagined that natural selection induces variability, whereas it implies only the preservation of such variations as arise are beneficial to the being under its conditions of life. Now, this is one of those sentences which is quite complicated. You have to break it down and take some sort of note of it. And you say he doesn't say where the variations come from. Now, maybe that is because you have to read the rest of the book to actually understand it. Otherwise, it would be the longest sentence in history. Okay, so I'm going to try and put this natural selection thing to you in simpler terms. He's talking about the changing of an environment. When he talks about mutations, you seem to think that mutations mean things with two heads or six arms and humans with two bodies or something. No, this isn't the case. In fact, I'll try and explain this to you in a better term. Okay, I've got here the letters warm. Warm, okay. Now we know there's 26 letters in the alphabet. So the W is just one letter, and for this scenario, W means short fur. Okay, we want to get to the word cold. Now this obviously represents an animal that will be changing from a warm environment to a cold environment, and for obvious reasons it will need to change. Now, if you were to actually roll a dice for every one of these, you need 4 dice, 26 letters on each dice. Roll them all in order so you suddenly get cold. Let's say this is a mutation. That would be almost impossible. It would take 500,000 throws on average, just with these 4 letters, just to find yourself with the letters cold turning up. So natural selection doesn't actually work like that. The way it works is, right, there's a 1 in 26 chance of getting, say, long fur, the longest fur, from W, which represents the shortest fur. Once you have that, you have the rest of the animal, say, is the same at the moment. So once you have that, you'll find that what happens is the animal with the shortest fur has trouble living in a slightly colder environment, and the longer furred one will predominantly breed. Okay, the rest of the animal be more or less the same. So we've just had a change in fur, that's all that's happened. Okay, we'll go on to the next letter, and let's say A represents lean, and the O of cold, let's say that represents fat. So we've had our 1 in 26 mutation, which has now got longer fur and is doing very well on it. So the shorter fur versions are dying out. But now we have not only a longer furred animal, but one with more body fat. Now, as it gets colder still, the one with longer fur and body fat is then, again, it'll be a 1 in 26 chance of getting the letter O. I hope you're with me. I'll try to explain it simply. So, you will then find that you've got a long fur and fat in the predominant animal that's doing well. The short furred has disappeared, the lean ones have also started to disappear. So we get to the next letter. Let's say the R of warm represents long body parts. Okay, I'll just write that in. I'll scribble that. So, but then we get shorter body parts. Shorter body. It's very scribbled. So, we started out, so now we've got a long-furred animal with body fat and shorter body parts. Shorter body parts, very important, of course, when it gets colder. Okay, and the longer body parts, you're at a disadvantage. So all these things slowly come into changing this warm animal into a colder animal. Okay, obviously the animal's not colder, environment's colder. So these animals start to die out. These start to obviously be the ones that take over. For the sake of the last letter, I'm going to put colour in for the letter M and white in for the letter D. So we now have an interesting one with this one, the colour and the white. Why? Because actually white is not a good colour for cold climates. It's a rubbish colour because it reflects heat, reflects the sun, and it doesn't store heat like black colour does, or a dark colour. But, and here's where evolution is great, without the white fur, you're not going to catch your prey, or you're not going to escape with camouflage. So white becomes very important in an icy conditions, even though it doesn't actually help in keeping the body warm. It's still, what it does is it helps you survive. So this is just obviously an example. You can do this with anything. But what was changing from this to this in one step would have been 500,000 to 1 just on based on the 4 letters. If you have many more factors built in, obviously it goes into the billions to 1. So you would wait for millions of generations to get anywhere. But natural selection has brilliantly, naturally, produced an animal that likes cold instead of warm. And that can go either way, obviously. You can do that for animals in water, animals on land. And that is how it works. It's not just, when you talk about mutations, that is the type of mutations we're talking about. Ones that are beneficial in the environment in which you live in. Now, let's go to your ladybugs, or ladybirds as we call them in Britain, rather rapidly. You say this wasn't explained, but in fact Darwin explains this very well. If you look at, he explains it through butterflies actually, the changing colours over time in butterflies in the percentage of the populations. Again, in where he lived, it was the Industrial Revolution, and on the buildings, he noticed this himself, the buildings were turning black. In fact, the area in which he came from, they called it the Black Country, because with the industrialisation, the houses started to get sooted up. And whereas when he was younger, he noticed predominantly lighter butterflies, which when they were on the walls, actually blended in well. The walls got darker, and the light ones obviously stood out, and the birds ate them, or the animals ate them. Whereas the darker ones, you know, became, the darker walls were more useful to the darker ones. You can say this about the ladybirds as well with predators. Ladybirds don't blend in so much, they actually give out warning signals. But if, of course, the predator, the predator comes along that is no longer bothered about red and prefers orange, finds red in fact a colour of berries that it eats perhaps, thought, oh, they're nice. whereas before it could have been a warning sign. So it's what comes along. It's a natural predation thing. It's very difficult to put this in time. I've run out of time, but I hope this helped you on our way a little bit, and no doubt you'll be responding to me. Peace.